Hello and welcome to COS Today, as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Today's Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Welcome to Convention of States Today. This is episode number 311, and this is the August Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman. I want to yield the floor to Marengo Mike to bring us an important reminder.
Marengo Mike here, asking you to hit that like, subscribe, and especially that notification bell so you'll be reminded every time we go live. We really do appreciate your support. Now, back to our program.
Okay, thanks, Marengo. Hey, Ken, up there in the top corner of my screen, I see a QR code. Would you give a quick word of explanation to our viewers?
Sure enough, John, that's our COS Today volunteer QR code. Basically, we are looking for volunteer support. So if you don't even have to be a volunteer. If you're watching a program out there on YouTube or Facebook, you don't need to be a volunteer, although we'd like you to be one. You can hit that QR code and use your smartphone, put in your name and your email address, and you will show us that you are supporting the programming that we are providing. And we look forward to having you join us.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Ken. Now, before I announce the topic for tonight's broadcast, I want to remind our viewers that just 1 month ago, last month, the month of July, the roundtable topic was Elon Musk and the America Party. We lambasted his idea of starting a third party. We took it apart, and there was no way to put it back together. We just dismantled it, and we said time and again, hope Elon is listening because he needs to drop this idea. Well, maybe he was listening, because in the last week, I've heard several news reports that he is dropping his idea of starting a third party. So there you have it. Talk about action from Convention of States Today. Yeah, Dale, thumbs up?
All right.
Okay. Well, the topic tonight is the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. Now, to get into it, we're going to take a pretty deep dive, and our friend Gary Harbaugh has made a presentation. We're going to play that recording for you right now. Watch it and enjoy it and pay attention to what Gary has to say.
Are in some sense law in the formal sense, but really they are political decisions. And in deciding this question about birthright citizenship, there are really a number of Supreme Court cases that relate to this, but there's one key case that is the bedrock upon which the new decision will probably rest. And that's the decision of the United States versus Wong Kim. This is a Supreme Court case from 1898 when it was decided. So for those of you not quick in math, that was 127 years ago. It's a long opinion. The majority opinion runs nearly 40 pages. The dissenting opinion runs about 20 pages. So there's all kinds of legal analysis and, rulings, looking at other Supreme Court rulings, going all the way back to English common law, commentaries on the law of nations, and so on. Very, very long and interesting opinion in some respect. The dissenting opinion is the one, I think, as is often the case, rests on better logic and reasoning. But anyway, the legal analysis of any court case always begins with what are the facts of this case. And the facts of this case are undisputed. Sometimes court cases, facts are disputed and they rest on what the jury may have decided the facts to be. But in this case, the facts are really undisputed. So Wong Kim Ark's parents came to the United States probably as Chinese laborers sometime in maybe the 1870s, 1860s. And Wong Kim was born in 1873. In 1890, his parents and Wong Kim Ark, when he was about 17, returned to China. Sometime later, Wong Kim Ark returned to the United States and stayed here until around 1895. Went back, or 1894, went back to China for a period of time, then returned to the United States in 1895. And the collector of customs refused him entry to the United States in 1895. And Wong Kim Ark claimed, hey, I'm a citizen of the United States. I was born here. I should be admitted. The collector of customs said, no, you're of Chinese descent. You're not permitted to enter. And so that's how the case went to the United States Supreme Court. And the sole question really presented was whether he was a citizen. And the court's opinion said the question is whether a child of Chinese descent who are at time of his birth subjects to the Emperor of China but have a permanent domicile in the United States, carrying on a business, not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity under the Emperor of China, become a citizen at the time of his birth by virtue of the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment, the key phrase is all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. And so
can everybody hear this?
really the question is, what does this phrase mean?
I hear it.
And yes. The court recognized
all right.
that there are essentially two aspects of allegiance. One is civil and the other is political. And every person physically within any country is subject to the civil and likewise the criminal laws of that country. And what the court did is they applied this very broadly to say that if you're subject to the United States because you are physically present in the United States, then you're a subject of the United States. This rests really on two principles. And one of those principles is the principles of feudalism, really. And then the other is that the California laws and customs and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had in other cases essentially treated people who were born in America, regardless of their parentage, as citizens. But there's one thing that both the majority opinion and the dissenting opinion agree upon, and I'm going to read a paragraph from the case, fairly short, basically says, nor can it be doubted that it is the inherent right of every independent nation to determine for itself and according to its own constitution and laws what classes of persons shall be entitled to citizenship. And so everybody agrees a nation can decide for itself who its citizens are. And the majority said, hey, the 14th Amendment says if you're born here, you're a citizen of the United States. The dissenting opinion said, hey, wait a minute. It's not quite that simple. And really, the majority opinion rests on the principles and the law of feudalism. So you probably have little recollection, if you've ever studied feudalism, of what it was. But here's a couple of definitions. Feudalism was a set of legal, economic, military, cultural, and political customs from medieval Europe from the roughly 9th to 15th centuries. And it says that you structure society around relationships derived from the holding of land in exchange for service or labor. So it's a set of reciprocal legal military obligations that rested on the key concepts of being a lord or a vassal or a serf, all of whom, everyone was bound by a system of obligation to the land, those landed classes. Essentially, everyone born in England under common law was a subject of the king. The nobility was directly obligated to the king, and all the peasants, the common people, were obligated to the king through their overlords, that is, the nobility. And you really saw this if you happen to watch Downton Abbey. You saw this well into the 20th century, that in England, there was the nobility, the classes of people who owned land, and the classes of the common people who did not own land, and they were the serfs. Their obligations were to their overlords, who were landowners, and their obligations were to the king. So that principle, the majority of the court said that that common law principle applied in America even after the American Revolution. The dissenting opinion said, hey, wait a minute, that is essentially what was overthrown in the revolution, and that principle never applied to America. The majority said, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They really looked at it very broadly as like the civil obligations one had as a resident, as an occupant of a country. And this principle they applied to the question of citizenship. But the minority or even the majority agreed that nationality is essentially a political idea. And it really, the majority and the dissent both agree that citizenship is a political concept. The majority went with the law of England, what's called the law of the soil, that said if you're born on this soil, you're a citizen. The dissenting opinion said, no, wait a minute. It's not the soil that determines your political connection. It is your parentage. And the minority opinion, the dissent, said this whole idea of nationality being tied to where you were born was what had just been overthrown in the American Revolution. And so in feudalism, people were bound to the land and to the landowner and ultimately to the king. In the United States, we had never had the concept of people as subjects of a king, even though people born here pre-revolution were technically subjects to the king. The people in this country had always considered themselves to be free. They were citizens of the colony in which they were born and obligations there, but they had always considered themselves to be free people. The Wong Kim Ark case was kind of a throwback to that concept of feudalism that said, hey, you are bound by the objects of the land on which you were born. So anyway, there's a couple of things that we can use to distinguish this case from what's going on today. One is that even at the time of common law in England, there was the concept that people who were in hostile occupation of a country, of England, did not become citizens at birth. So one of the things that we have going on in America today is people who have come here illegally are in effect in hostile occupation of America and therefore are not entitled to the benefits of American citizenship, even under common law. Wong Kim Ark's parents, on the other hand, had legally entered the United States, and so he was in a different category than people who have come here illegally. And one of the other interesting aspects of this, which I think is a key concept, is this notion of subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is that people who enter the United States illegally are not really subject to the United States. And this is proven in effect by the fact that the government of Mexico and other governments from which people have come advocate on behalf of their citizens who are in the United States. They advocate for them for better treatment, things like that, which is proof positive that these people are subjects of another country. And in fact, we see during these ongoing ICE raids, many times the people that are protesting these ICE raids, that are rounding up illegal immigrants and for deportation, we see these people waving like Mexican flags, which certainly says, hey, we don't consider ourselves subjects of the United States. We think we're subjects of another country, and we are advocates for that country. So I think, and I hope the United States Supreme Court will say that, in effect, either Wong Kim Ark decision was okay because his parents legally immigrated, or they will say people here illegally are under hostile occupation and were never really citizens of the United States, never really subject to the jurisdiction of the United States in the complete sense, even though they're subject to our laws, our civil and criminal laws, while they are here, their allegiance is political and is still to the country of their origin. They are not subject to the United States in the sense of people who are born here of American parentage who are subject to our laws or subject to our government. Another distinction, interestingly made by the dissent, is that the people who are subjects to the king were never in any sense similar to citizens in the United States who were under the United States president. The king was a sovereign who had historically absolute power over his kingdom and all of its subjects, while people in America were never subjects of the president. The president was never given in the Constitution the kind of broad powers that a king had. The president only had limited powers, and therefore people, while they lived under the law of that as executed by that president was in no way like the sovereign power of a king. So what's the Supreme Court going to decide? This is fundamentally a political decision that the Supreme Court will have to decide. One of the most valuable things that in the entire world is U.S. citizenship, to allow people to come here illegally, give birth to a child, and claim that anchor baby anchors them in the United States is really to allow people to steal one of the most valuable things in the world. What's that thing worth? Well, President Trump is basically selling U.S. citizenship for $5 million. So you can make the argument that U.S. citizenship is worth at least $5 million. To allow people to steal that would be wrong. And so we'll see what the Supreme Court decides. I think the better argument really rests with the dissenting opinion in the Wong Kim Ark case, but that's what law has been applied historically in America. But I'm hoping to see that the court will rule either distinguishing that case on its facts or distinguishing it based upon the fact that that case was really wrongly decided some 127 years ago. So that's how I see it.
Wow, Gary, thanks for that lesson. Now, I want to tell you, I have 4 post-secondary degrees, a bachelor's, 2 masters, and a doctoral degree. But I have never taken a class in a law school. I feel now like I've had a law school lesson. Thank you for that lesson, Gary. It was very enlightening. And
you're very welcome.
My initial response is, may the dissenters prevail, as we know the Supreme Court has taken this case of birthright citizenship, and may they side with the dissent. I want to go around the table and just get a brief reaction from each one. I gave my reaction. And Ken, what's your initial response to Gary's lesson on birthright citizenship?
Well, I believe it's spot on as far as what I believe he thinks, and I think the Supreme Court should rule on. To me, it's pretty black and white. I mean, it just really comes down to, again, I go back to a very simple, what's legal and what's illegal. And somebody who enters here illegally doesn't automatically get rights. There's a way to do it. There's a way to come in and become a citizen. You don't jump the line and become a citizen and have kids and have them become citizens. So I think my response is, I think and I hope the court does the right thing. I think they'll rule in favor of that original ruling and see it that way.
Okay, Dale, take a minute and give us your response.
First of all, I apologize. David, can you hear now?
I can.
I got a message from David that he couldn't hear anything, and that's why I popped in with asking if everyone could hear. So apologize for that break. My whole thing here is I'm just amazed at how much I'm learning here about and the importance, I would say, of everyone to learn what is behind what makes up these amendments, what makes up our Constitution. And I want to thank Gary for doing this, quite honestly. I never knew the background, the what was behind the birthright citizenship thing. So I guess my thing is, and this is, I'm learning so much. I'm just learning so much, and I am beginning to recognize the more and more the importance of learning the background and what was intended originally for these amendments and so forth. So.
Okay, so you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yes.
Okay.
It's difficult. It's difficult, but it's doable.
Okay. David, what's your response to Gary's presentation?
Very interesting. I too was interested in the minutia, but particularly in feudalism and the basis of the thought. When I was doing a little research into this, and I was looking at some of the dissenting opinions from the 1895, one of the things that came up, and I don't remember the name of the treaty, but there was a treaty in 1868 where there was a group of commercial interests that were trying to develop business in China and open markets in China. I mean, it's kind of like what we're doing today with tariffs and going back and forth. And it as part of the treaty, they were going to allow people from China to come here, and then thereby, because of the treaty and the company they worked for, would be subject to the jurisdiction. At least that's the way they determined it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I also read that there was some people that felt very strongly that this was in response to the Dred Scott decision. It was the 1850s, much further back than that. But this was truly an attempt to get former black slaves to become citizens, and not have them go through the process, not having them sign up. They don't have to go out and swear on a Bible and all the rest of that stuff. This is a very troubling issue. And, and I know that there's 22 states that have filed lawsuits, and every single one of them believe that you should just let anybody bring a pregnant woman in here from no matter where she's from, and let her drop her kid, and poof, magic, presto changeo, she's an American.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's right.
Okay, thank you, David. Now, Larry, you're next to give your response. I see on the screen that you're muted, so unmute yourself, please, and tell us your response to Gary's presentation. There you go.
Well, this has been in my craw ever since I learned that we have such a thing as birthright citizenship. It wasn't all that long ago. I just can't. I'm like the rest of you. I think I don't understand how we could authorize someone born from illegal parents to have citizenship just like that, and effectively jump the line just because of where they're born. So this is really gnawed away at me for a long time, or for some time at any rate. I wouldn't even go so far as to say the 14th Amendment was it's a very limited amendment. It's one of the three Reconstruction amendments.
Yep.
And it was enacted primarily or specifically to make sure that freed blacks could become citizens, because what we had after the Emancipation Proclamation, we had a bunch of free blacks, but they couldn't become citizens, and they could never become citizens because of Dred Scott. Dred Scott was the law of the land. So this is a very limited, in my view. The 14th Amendment is very limited as it pertains to citizenship. It does have the first section that talks about generalized how we go about getting citizenship, but I don't think it really even speaks to birthright citizenship. It speaks to black birthright citizenship only. Indians weren't included in this. In fact, had to be taken care of in a later executive order, or legislation, I should say. So I'm in agreement with the rest of you. And the feudalism was brand new to me. and what I'm going to be able to speak to a little bit later on, this hostile,
Hostile occupation.
Is something
Yeah.
that I was unaware of until I read a little bit about the.
Okay. Well, with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us have given our opinions and responses to Gary's law school lesson. And if the Supreme Court is listening to us, they will make the right decision. So let's go all the way around the circle and come to Larry and Gary. And let me just ask Gary to take a minute or two and just give us, in a nutshell, a summarization of your argument about the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship.
Yeah, thanks, John. So as David and Larry have mentioned, blacks in America were without citizenship, and because of the Dred Scott decision. And so they were in some kind of a legal limbo after the Civil War. They had been, the Emancipation Proclamation had freed them. And because of the Northern Victory, they were free people. But the Dred Scott case said, Africans can never become citizens. And so really what this decision, or what this 14th Amendment did, was to poke the Supreme Court in the eye and say, hey, guess what? We're going to change all that. Because the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott case, this was 1857, said not only blacks could not become citizens, but that they were not subject to any of the protections of the Constitution. And so if you read Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, it makes it very clear if you were born here or naturalized here, you were a citizen of the United States and of the state where you were born, and you were entitled to all the protections of the law and the Constitution. So that was really, as Larry pointed out, intended for the purpose of the slaves, to make sure that it was clear that the African Americans that were here, bingo, they are now citizens. And so the second, summary point was the Wong Kim Ark case. Really, they don't say it rests on feudalism, but the dissent points it out, that this principle that you're a subject to whoever the overlord is that owns the land, or that is the land grantor, that you are subject to that person, and that's a lifelong thing and you can't escape it, really is feudalism in a nutshell. And so that was never an idea that took hold in America. Supreme Court was saying, we adopted the common law, and because in common law England, man, you were a subject and then you're a citizen. And the third point, this thing that Larry's, I think, going to talk more about hostile occupation, interesting point. But the idea that people who can be here, I guess really after the Wong Kim Ark decision was decided, it sort of became the blanket presumption that anybody born here was a citizen. And that's never really been tested in the last 127 years until it's going to be tested now. Mm-hmm. And so just because the Ninth Circuit in California, they had treated people born here as citizens, and the court adopted that opinion, then it's kind of been, hey, that's the way it is in America. And nobody has ever really, unfortunately, tested this to find out what the Supreme Court would say today.
And it's about to be tested. And the Supreme Court has taken the case, and you never know when they'll announce it, but look for late June next year, right, Gary? I keep wanting to
probably
call you Larry.
When it'll come down.
Probably towards the end of the term. That's what they do with the big ones, and this is a big one.
Late year in 2026.
Late June.
Late June 2026.
That's when their term closes. Yeah.
Really?
They save up all the big ones for that. Well, this whole thing was based on the 14th Amendment, which refers to people who are born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So I'm going to turn to David Allen Punt now and ask David, take a deep dive into that whole argument. What does it mean to be born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof?
Yeah, I think we all understand what being born means. I mean, if you're born here of legal parents, of citizens of the United States, then you automatically become a citizen like all of us have. Uh, my parents were citizens. My grandfather became a citizen. He was brought over as a child, and then was adopted by U.S. citizens back in the late part of the 19th century. So that's the easiest one, being born. No involvement that you have to do as long as your parents are citizens. The other way, naturalization, is someone who comes over here through the front door, makes an application through one of the embassies, and each of them have different rules on how to do that. And you fill out the forms, you apply for citizenship, you're accepted as a potential citizen, and then you come to the country. You take a series of classes if you need them. You take language instruction if you need it. And then once you get ready, you go before a judge and through a ceremony, put your hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the laws of the U.S. Constitution. And that's naturalization.
Yeah.
You can also marry a citizen, marry a U.S. citizen, and there's also provisions for serving in the U.S. military, but only if you're, first of all, a legal resident. You have to apply and then become a legal resident in this country, and then you can use one of those two methods as well.
Okay.
Okay,
Is that everything you wanted to say about it?
that's all I want to say about it.
Okay. I think it's also important to keep in mind that it says subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And it seems to me that if your mother and or father entered the country illegally, and you're still preborn, you haven't, you're still in utero. Seems to me your first step into the country was not subject to the jurisdiction of the country because your mother or father entered illegally, and you're getting started on the wrong foot right there. And so, we could go around and around about what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But thank you, David, for your insight into that. And since we're on David, he is the host and speaker and producer of a nice little feature that we like to bring up on the screen, and it's called Dave's Daily Dose. And so let's get a dose of Dave today.
Confused about the redistricting war in Texas? Who isn't? The latest at this moment is that 47 Democrats, state legislators, all have left the building and the state. They didn't even want to allow chatting about a plan to redraw the lines for federal congressional districts, something we normally hear more about just after a census. Boy, is there a lot to unpack here. This is Dave's Daily Dose on BrokenRoadRadio.com. I'm David Allen Punt. First of all, it's happened before in Texas. This is the third time in the last 5 years that Democrat state lawmakers have left to avoid voting on something. Usually that something is redistricting, not flood relief, not Medicaid spending, not raising or lowering taxes, not even to raise lawmaker pay. Redistricting. Expect a lot of rhetoric, lots of loud noises, lots of nasty language, but at the base of it all is drawing lines, imaginary lines on a map. The head of the GOP said recently on Fox that the line changing came about now as opposed to 2030 because there was a mistake in the nose counting in 2020, and this is an adjustment. And there are lots more noses in Texas now as compared to 5 years ago. More noses means more federal congressional districts, which means more seats in Congress, specifically the House of Representatives. And they're the guys and gals who spend the money and impeach people. Now, let's get into gerrymandering, a method used to draw lines to include certain people in certain districts. One district in Minnesota runs from Canada to a St. Paul suburb, nearly 400 miles. Illinois districts resemble snakes and sometimes octopuses. Octopi? on the map to pick up a group of Democrats south of Chicago to then hook into a group of Democrats close to Missouri. The political party in charge gets to draw the lines, and most of the time the lines favor the political party in charge. Both parties do it. It's legal, happens all the time. What happens next? Texas Democrats will eventually come back to work and vote against the line drawing plan, and because Republicans are in charge, the plan will be approved. Meanwhile, those Democrats who would like a better job, maybe one in a big White House on the East Coast, will make lots of noise about the destruction of democracy in a country that doesn't have a democracy. We have a democratic republic. Expect lots more noise to come. I'm David Allen Punt.
David, I chuckle when I hear that because your prediction came true. The wayward Texas Democrats did return, and they did vote no, and they got overruled by the majority party. And Texas has new congressional districts now. Of course, California is going to rebut that, and then we'll have dueling banjos all across the republic. So thank you, David, for that daily dose. And you're muted, David. Unmute yourself so we can hear you.
One of the things that people forget about is that just because a Republican won the district before doesn't mean they're going to win it the next time.
This is true.
People have changes of mind all the time, and that's one of those constant things. The Republican district in Texas now may or may not become a Republican district in 2 years or 4 years.
Yeah. Nobody knows actually. Yeah. Dale, I see your hand, and I also see that you're muted.
I've been trying my best to unmute everybody, and I forgot to unmute myself. John, we need to make this a topic. I don't know if we will do it in the regular weekly COS today, or if you want to do it as a roundtable. There's got to be a model, a redistricting model that is done by some state out there that every state should adopt. And perhaps it's Indiana. I've heard it said it might be Indiana, but there's got to be a model out there as to how redistricting should be handled. So I'm just throwing that out there. Or if anyone wants to take it on as a presentation, I think it would be very interesting.
So, all right. Yes, Ken.
Yeah, John, I just wanted to point out a brief thing that I picked up in David's analysis there of what his topic was tonight. And I found it interesting that a very small portion of what he was talking about there was educational classes and speaking English. I think we had a very good example that you had to be under a rock this week not to see that there was a truck driver that pulled an illegal U-turn because he couldn't read signs. Mm-hmm. And this guy wasn't here to pick crops. He's driving a semi-truck, and 3 people were killed because of it.
Yeah.
How in the world did that guy get a what is it, a CDL?
Two of them. He had 2 different licenses.
How in the world did that happen? That's amazing.
He got him in blue state.
There was somebody that worked at I think it was the BMV in Kentucky, that observed other workers there getting a little $200 put in their hand and issuing CDLs to people.
Wow.
And so I can imagine if it was going on in one BMV office I think it was Kentucky, probably goes on in BMV offices all across the fruited plain. And so, people bribe people and they get these CDLs with not even being able to read English or identify, signs by their shape. It's shocking, but it's 3 people died because of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Senseless tragedy. Yes, Larry.
Mm-hmm.
We've had legislation right here in Indiana the last 2 sessions to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens. It's never made it out of committee, but we have, and a Republican sponsored the bill this session. And so, I mean, we have a lot of bleeding hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Minnesota approved that last year, the year before last, that illegal aliens would be getting not driver's licenses, and the rationale was that they would at least be able to buy insurance. They're going to drive anyway, so they can buy insurance and be legal. But in Minnesota, you not only you get a driver's license, when you go to the DMV, you become a registered voter.
right.
Now they make caution, and as Steve Simon, the Secretary of State, makes the caution, just because they're on the voting rolls doesn't mean they get to vote. There's a big sign on the back of their license that says, this is not for voting." Maybe they read it. Maybe they can't read it.
Who knows?
Maybe nobody turns it over to look.
Yeah, very much so.
Strange things happen in this republic. Yep. Well, we're going to see this reminder from Marengo Mike right now.
Marengo Mike here, asking you to hit that like, subscribe, and especially that notification bell so you'll be reminded every time we go live. We really do appreciate your support. Now, back to our program.
Oh, that guy is cute, isn't he? Well, Dale, I'm going to ask you to wax eloquent now. Gary made the argument that in that, what was it, 1897 or 98 Supreme Court decision, that the majority opinion rests on the principles of feudalism. Dale, take us through that.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna be repeating a lot what Gary said, but my task here was to dive into feudalism and get the history of it and get to what else we can learn about it. Well, what I found out was the origins, like it's been said, that this emerged in the medieval times in Europe, 9th to the 15th centuries, and developed after the fall of Rome. But the key here is that the power was decentralized at that time, and believe it or not, this I didn't understand, but the kings, we've all heard of the kings from that period of time, they were actually weak. It was the local lords that were the dominant forces at that time. So kings were weak, local lords were very strong. Now, the core structure of feudalism, of course, based on land ownership, personal loyalty. Once again, the lords granted land to vassals. You know what a vassal is? A vassal would be an individual that was loyal to you, that was loyal, and of course that grant was in exchange for their loyalty, for their military service. It could be whatever it was. So and then the serfs and the peasants were bound to whoever owned the land. So the key here is the key core structure is the pyramid, and that was the kings to the nobles to the knights and peasants. So that was the structure at the time. And can you imagine, living during that period of time? That was the law. That was the way society was arranged and the way things operated at that time. Now, what were the obligations and rights? As you can imagine, anyone that granted you land, you were obligated to that person, and you had to be loyal to whoever granted you that land. So land equaled power, and then your allegiance was tied to the land owner, not the nation. That was very key. Now, your allegiance was tied to the landowner, not the nation, not your nation. In practice, Security was provided in exchange for freedom. Rigid class system. Wars often were private disputes between lords, not between nations. But the justice and governance was conducted by the lords. So the lords were the key people in the feudal system. Now, the decline of the feudal system came about as the rise of nations, states, and stronger kings, the growth of commerce, and how wealth began to shift. Standing armies replaced feudal knights, but what is key here is the political revolutions that started to reject the feudal obligations. So that leads us to the relevance of the feudal system, and that is, as we know, allegiance under the feudal system was tied to the land and the birth, and sovereignty placed with people and nation. The key points here are the American Revolution broke this, and that's what played such a big role in the decline of feudalism was the American Revolution. Citizenship defined by national principles, not feudal soil. So that's how the feudal system has come about. That's kind of the history and how the feudal system came about.
Wow, Dale, that's a great breakdown of Gary's argument. Thanks for doing that research and that PowerPoint. I always like to have something to look at.
Okay.
That's very helpful. Okay, we're going to move on to the last big point that Gary made, and that is that people who have come here illegally are actually in hostile occupation of the United States, and therefore they are not subject to our jurisdiction. And Larry Hudson is going to take us through that part of the argument. Larry?
Yeah, be happy to. It was a novel idea, Gary. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, it gripes me when I see the Mexican flag being waved and that sort of thing. It's irritating to see people like you and me, we think, standing out obstructing ICE when they go to make an arrest of a gangbanger or some drug runner or somebody that's killed someone or run over someone, and they don't want him deported. So it's just kind of beggars belief. But when you said that, I think it was in the majority opinion, or I'm sorry, maybe it was in the minority opinion, that the idea of illegal immigrants can be categorized as, I think you used the term enemy combatants, then children born to these individuals, of course, would not be granted citizenship pursuant to the 14th Amendment. I think it was the Justice Gray who wrote that opinion, and he used the phrase children born of alien enemies in hostile occupation as opposed to enemy combatants. And I can't remember which phrase you used, but either way, I think it's a novel idea, but I don't think it would stand up in a court of law as much as I might like it to. I think we all remember video of that group of illegals that bum rushed the border fence back in, 2022 or so, 2023, knocking the fence over and along with the border guards that were trying to keep the illegals out. But again, I don't think it rises to the definition of enemy combatants or hostile occupation. Gang members, human traffickers, drug runners, maybe, but certainly not ordinary illegal border crossers. At least I don't think so. But I thought it was interesting pursuing that. I took a look at the dissenting view that you quoted, written by Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at that time. I think his name was Fuller. And he stated that the conclusion of the majority opinion he thought was correct. I found this most interesting, that the children of citizens of the United States who have been born abroad since July of, I think he said 1868, when the amendment was declared ratified, they then are aliens unless they have or shall obtain upon getting back in the country at the proper age. They've got to become citizens, even though they're born to citizens in this country. I thought, well, that's perfect. That's defeated the whole structure of his argument. You could add to that, I think, maybe children of individuals here on student visas, H-1B visas come to mind. We've got a lottery system for visas that can produce citizens through this birthright citizenship loophole. I assume, maybe it can't. I'm not familiar with the visa program, but the last thing that I found interesting was in trying to research the occupation aspect was a case that went prior to I think it was back in the 1870s. So it went prior to the Wong Ark case, and it defined citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States. I think it was on hold on just a second, page 72. It declared that persons may be citizens of the United States without regard to their citizenship of a particular state. And it overturns the Dred Scott decision by making all persons born within the United States and subject to its jurisdiction citizens of the United States. That its main purpose was to establish the citizenship of the Negro just can't be doubted. You can't get away from that. But the phrase subject to its jurisdiction was intended to exclude from its operation children of ministers. I think these were ministers of government now, not religious ministers, consuls, and citizens of subjects of foreign states who happen to be born within the United States. So I found that, I think, very persuasive, and I would rest my case on that. And that's the Slaughterhouse case. If you want to look it up, it's over 120 pages in length, and it actually talks about slaughterhouses, but it gets to citizenship in the meat in the middle.
Okay, Larry, thank you. Well, the question remains, what will the Supreme Court decide? And I thought it would be fun to go around the table here and ask each one to give a prediction. I'm going to start with Gary, our legal expert. Gary, what do you think the Supreme Court will decide?
Well, I think this is fundamentally a political decision, and I think that the Supreme Court is going to say that people born here, of people who came in hostile occupation that are illegally crossed the border, the children of those people are not citizens. So,
okay, we've got one vote on that side. Larry, what do you think?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know that we'll have 3 votes that will be nays, or they will be nays if we're talking about it being proof positive for birthright citizenship. But we've got 2 wafflers, the Chief Justice and Amy Coney Barrett, who can never decide who they want to placate. I think they run scared. So I'm not satisfied that it'll come down the way it should. To me, it's not rocket science. It's common sense. We should not have citizenship in this country.
So should I mark you as undecided?
I'm pessimistic.
Okay, well
that sounds like a no to me.
Leaning towards no. Okay.
The Supreme Court is the very entity that has screwed this up.
Right.
This issue, the 14th Amendment is very clear in my view.
Yeah.
Very clear. It addressed the Negro. That's all it addressed.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's the Supreme Court that has given this problem in the first place.
yeah, and they've made a few really bad decisions. You know, Dred Scott,
Roe v. Wade comes to mind.
Plessy v. Ferguson, Roe v. Wade. The good news is that given enough time, they come to their senses. They get some new justices on there, and those bad decisions can and have been overturned. Yeah, Larry?
But they're very reluctant to change
Sure.
the decision. They go on precedent, case law, and they don't like to.
Yep.
Roberts is he's more interested in his legacy than anything.
Okay, we've got a 1-to-1 tie here. David, which way are you voting?
Well, I'm an optimistic pessimist, or a pessimistic optimist. I'm not sure which. One of the middle. I'm hopeful that they will see, because the court now is composed of at least 3 good constitutional conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually will dig into stuff like this, and they will have read the material about Dred Scott, and this being this a move away from that and to authorize black slaves to become citizens. The other part of it is that there were 6 guys in 1895 who decided that that they had access to the same material, and they went the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somehow they figured out that feudalism was much more important, that this treaty of 1868 was vital, and that everybody should be granted citizenship just on the basis of where they were born. I'm a neutral. Well, I'm going to go with Gary. I'm going to let it hang out there, and I'm going to say, I think that they will come to their senses and they will make the right decision this time.
Okay, a 2-to-1. Okay, Dale, where does your vote fall?
I think the Supreme Court is going to view the recording of this analysis, and
now we're in trouble.
This will play such an important role that they are going to vote in favor of overturning that, and so I vote with Gary.
Okay, so it's 3-to-1. So
we'll change your vote, Gary.
Ken, you're going
to help me out
closer to a tie, or you're going to clinch the majority. What is it, Ken?
Well, an argument can be made that we definitely need to address our path to citizenship. I know that has to be addressed.
Yeah.
At some point, and it should be done soon. That being said, I think we've already shown one case tonight where I know as Larry, I think Larry has said, that there's a few on the Supreme Court that wear their hearts on their sleeves, and it tends to muddy their decisions. And there's a segment of our population that also runs by the heart on their sleeves. I honestly, I can see how the meter goes either way. I think that we had one really good example already. And if this thing isn't going to be voted on until late June, I think we're going to see more evidence of that points to why we have to do this the right way. And I have to have faith that our Supreme Court will come to the right decision. So I'd go with Gary on this. I'd say in the long run, we're going to have some other evidence that will push them to make the decision and take that heart off their sleeve.
Okay, Ken. So it's 4-to-1. So that's the majority, and my vote doesn't matter.
Oh, come on.
Well, I'm gonna throw in with Gary and the 4, but I'm on a 1 to 10 scale. I'm a 5.1, so I'm just barely over into the yes. Yeah. And I think some of you are also barely into that, but we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Well, friends, this brings us to the end of this month's roundtable. Before we close it out, I want to give you our email address. If you have any questions about Convention of States, any questions at all, you can email them to us at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Now, next Monday, September 1st, is a national holiday. It's called Labor Day. So we'll be showing one of the best of Convention of States today. A good repeat episode. Week after that is September the 8th, 7 p.m. Eastern, focusing on media bias. Okay, there's a ton of that.
I want to say just a little bit about this one coming up September 8th, media bias.
Yep.
This is our media bias expert, Michael Messier, and been talking to him about, he wanted to take a topic. He wanted to take something that was going on, and he wanted to analyze it like he thinks we should be looking at these things to judge the media and how they're reporting it to so that we can decide what the truth is. And I think I've got him convinced to take Gaza. Are people being starved in Gaza? Is genocide being committed in Gaza? What's the truth? And I think he's going to take that and analyze it, analyze the media handling of that particular topic.
Wow, sounds fascinating.
Wow,
Sure. That's I mean, if you listen to the different reports out there, and if that doesn't rile you up, I don't know what.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for that insight. That's great. Well, the week after that is September 15th, and COS Today is going to focus on burn bags and classified documents, another hot topic. Well, then our next Convention of States Today Roundtable will be on the fourth Monday of September. That'll be September 22nd, always at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll find out what the topic is later.
You hear that, David? 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern.
7 o'clock, yeah.
You got that, David?
Okay.
I do.
I do.
I think it's Larry who needed to know.
Oh, and I should point out Larry too.
Yeah. Okay. Little shop talk there. Since we've embarrassed Larry, I'll just tell you, he was
to use a John Ackerman term, busted.
Larry was thinking that we were coming on at 8 o'clock tonight, and so we had to roust him out of the rack to get him in here at 7. Well, I want to show you episode number 30 of COS Basics on the so-called Runaway Convention. Let's see this.
Yeah, you might want to turn your volume up a little. I think this is a one that we had a little volume problem on it. So,
okay. John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana, with COS Basics. Today I'm using another point from attorney Rita M. Peters. I want to give her credit because it's due to her. She writes that our Constitution is not the illegitimate result of a so-called runaway convention. Okay? That's one of the lies that the opposition tries to propagate. The argument that our Constitution is the result of a runaway convention that was called by the Confederation Congress to revise the Articles of Confederation is a fabrication that is easily debunked by an examination of the historical documents. That is, the language and date of the Virginia call for the convention, and the instructions given to the Virginia delegates, as well as the instructions given by the other states to their delegates. It's a matter of fact that the Confederation Congress did not call the 1787 Constitutional Convention. It made a recommendation, but that's all it did. It made a mere recommendation. The Congress had no authority to call a convention under the Articles of Confederation, but the states did retain this authority as an aspect of their sovereignty. And so I repeat the point made by attorney Rita M. Peters, that our Constitution is not the illegitimate result of a runaway convention. Okay. Want to thank you for tuning in tonight, and I want to bid a fond farewell and say goodnight to you. And to close us out, here's a final message from Marengo Mike.
Marengo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.